high schools are a toxic mixture of boring and stressful, right? You know what I mean? Like they just hate high schools. Again, it's probably nothing new. It might have gotten worse over time. I don't know, but it certainly they don't love it. You know what I mean? And so if you loathe something that badly, you're probably not going to learn from it.
Do the bans work?
No, I mean, I don't think anybody,
Because,
I
because
should have said nobody thinks they do. Obviously, some people have convinced themselves that they just have to, right? But there's no data to support that. I mean, we're seeing two types of bans, right? We're seeing like Australia's type of the social media ban for under 16. There's no reason to think it would because we don't even have correlational data to suggest it's helpful for anything, right? Let alone causal data. And then in the U.S. and I think France and some other, I don't know, again, maybe Greece.
here in Greece, they try to impose measures for smartphone restriction in schools.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So we have a lot of that in the U.S. It's state by state here. It's not like a federal, sort of thing. So some states have it, some states don't. At this point, I mean, the evidence I think is increasingly clear that they don't do anything. I mean, we've had a number of studies come out, some that were hyped in irresponsible ways. But generally speaking, now across all these studies, we're seeing that like social media bans do not improve grades. They do not improve mental health. They do not improve student behavior. Even the couple that had come out and people were like, we're like on that side, we're like, study found blah blah blah. Turns out, no, it didn't. No, if you look at it closely, again, like the correlation was like 0.02. It was basically zero effect. It explains literally like 0% of the variance in school grades. It's just they ran 600,000 kids through this analysis, and so it became statistically significant, but literally has no practical significance whatsoever. It's better evidence against these bans than for them. So we have like a bunch of these studies. Again, like I said, some that were just badly hyped by news media, but that really just do not find any evidence. And I think Florida is a great example of this, that we're now 2 years into our state ban on smartphones in schools. And the Florida National Standardized Test for students dropped to their lowest level in 20 years. Now, I'm not saying that the ban caused school performance to drop, but it obviously didn't fix anything, right? It obviously wasn't the problem that Florida schools were experiencing, so, the evidence just isn't there. I mean, I think pretty clearly, but none of this stuff was about evidence anyway. I think it's the thing we have to admit. It's like none of these policies, none of this, like, the books, the policies, none of this is about evidence. This is about people are kind of dumb. And I am too in many ways in areas that I don't have expertise in. This is just like, again, a human nature thing. People get scared about something. They easily fall for any kind of grift that caters to their pre-existing fears, and they don't really care about evidence. Because I'm not making this up. I've been told this to my face. People say, "Well, here's a study that says that there's no effect here." Say, I don't care about the data. I don't care about the science. I've been told that multiple times, like with no shame at this point. So I think, like as the saying goes, if people tell you something, you should believe them, right? This has nothing to do with data. This is just a feel-good thing, and I think some of it's good faith. Some of it, I honestly think that old people sometimes just like to twist the screws for the young people. So it really is about screwing the kids, really, but it's being presented as helping the kids. I think news media love it because it sells newspapers. I think politicians love it because it makes them look like they're doing something useful when they're not. I think some scholars, like it because it's profitable, for them. So again, that's why, coming back to that theme, we sometimes follow the money, right? We should do that absolutely with the tech companies, but we should also do it with the people who are peddling fear to us, and there definitely is an industry there as well. It may be a smaller parasitic industry, but it still is an industry that's full of shit, and is just trying to profit off of our fears. And so, none of these policies were put in place because the evidence said that they would work. And if anything, they've actually made it harder to collect evidence, right? Because you can't do randomized control trials anymore. because at this point, all the kids have been exposed to the, I mean, it's done, so you can't even get the good experimental randomized control trial evidence now. You have to just settle for quasi experiments or time trends or this kinds of stuff. So, it's funny because you'll see these like reports, this happened in Orange County, Florida, which is right next door to my county, where they were the first county to put in this like really big, what they call a bell-to-bell cell phone ban. So the kids can't have it out at any point during the school day, not at lunch, not at recess, not when they're in the hall, nothing, not in the bathroom, nothing at all. And you see these like teachers would say, this is great. The kids are like singing songs, they're holding hands, they love to learn all of a sudden. They're all talking to each other. This is like utopia. And then I did a public records request. And it turned out the student data got worse. So there are more students who are being referred to mental health. There were more bullying incidences. The grades really didn't change, all that much. There were more suspensions. More kids were getting suspended because of the cell phone, policy. So the outcomes were pretty bad. And so it's interesting to see that juxtaposition, right? Like the teachers, the administrators making it sound like it's a utopia, which would be really odd in a way. If you think of like every school policy that's been attempted for the last 50 years and how none of them have done anything, and suddenly this one's the one that creates a utopia in like 2 months. But this complete discrepancy between what teachers said they were saying and the actual data from their own school, that said that they were just dead ass wrong somehow. And that doesn't mean the teachers are acting in bad faith. I think that's, again, human nature, right? They want to see something. And so that's their lens, is they only look for the pieces of evidence that support what they want to be true. Now, I also think that, being a college teacher myself, right? I don't like it when I see the students like staring at their cell phone, right? It makes me feel bad, right? So I think, it probably felt good for the teachers that, they weren't seeing that. Now, does that mean the students were paying attention? No. They were just daydreaming or doodling or falling asleep or talking to their friends or roughhousing, just like we did 40 years ago, because we didn't pay attention to the teachers in the 80s, and we didn't need smartphones to not pay attention to the teachers, but we didn't have the thing out in front of us, right? So we'd just be asleep. I remember being asleep on my desk, through many of my classes in high school. But I think it was just annoying for the teachers to see them, and now the teachers feel better, and that's probably been the big positive change, from cell phone bans, is the teachers are happier. It's not helping the kids at all, clearly not helping them at all, but the teachers are happier. So I guess there's something good came of it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So you're saying the most dangerous thing is that we are driving our attention to the wrong causes.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are some bad grades or some problems with attention or some problems with mental health, if we are just focusing on smartphones and social media, we're just missing the big picture. That's the danger there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, if we're worried about schools, for instance, we can just like listen to what kids are trying to tell us. I mean, in the United States, something like 70 to 80% of teenagers tell us that, high schools are a toxic mixture of boring and stressful, right? I mean? Like they just hate high schools. Again, it's probably nothing new. It might have gotten worse over time, I don't know, but it certainly, they don't love it. You know what I mean? And so if you loathe something that badly, you're probably not going to learn from it.